Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Deals for Dentists podcast. Through these podcast episodes, I'll be interviewing dentists and companies and aim to inspire, entertain, and educate you on the best tools and technologies out there. My goal is to help make your practice and career more profitable, efficient, and most importantly, more enjoyable. And today we are joined by Gary Takacs. And Gary, thank you so much for joining us.
Eric, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to be on the other side of the microphone with you today. Usually I'm the one doing the interviewing, and it's kind of fun to be on the other side of the microphone. Thanks for having me.
So, Gary, my favorite movie is The Godfather Part 2, and I think this is the closest I'm going to get to a Godfather. Your nickname is the Podfather, right?
Guilty as charged. Yes, I am known as the Podfather in dentistry. That's a name that Alan Mead. Some of your listeners will recognize the name Alan Mead from Dental Hacks notoriety. He tagged that moniker on me, and I happily accepted it. And it was because I created the very first dental podcast in 2011 called The Thriving Dentist Show.
That is super cool. And so the Thriving Dentist Show, you're the host of the Thriving Dentist Show. You also have a podcast called the Less Insurance Dependence Podcast, and you're a coach for dentists with the Thriving Dentist Academy. Is that right?
It. Yeah, that's it. The first podcast, Thriving Dentist Show, I started in 2011. Simply I love podcasts myself, and I wanted to create my own that was all about sharing useful information to dentists in a very convenient format. And it's been a wonderful ride. We just a couple of weeks ago hit episode 500. Kind of crazy, Eric, but that means we haven't missed an episode in 500 weeks. I'm nothing if not consistent.
And that's impressive.
It's been a fun ride, and love, the half-life of knowledge in dentistry is crazy, Eric. Dr. Gordon Christensen told me recently that the term half-life of dental knowledge, meaning that how long does it take what we know to double? And the half-life of dental knowledge today is like 2 years. That means 2 years from now, we're going to know twice as much as we know now, whether it means materials, techniques, products, behavioral aspects, the business side of dentistry. It is growing geometrically, and podcasts are just a great way to share and make it convenient for our listeners, because they can be multitasking. They can be driving, they could be on their morning walking the dog, on their morning run, and can take in some information while they're doing other tasks as well. So what a great format.
It is. Yeah. And it's podcasts are such a great way to learn. I'll, pop one on during the car ride. Of course, I live and work in the same town, so my commute's like 9 minutes. But if I'm going for a long drive, a jog, or I'm, doing something around the house, it's just such a great way to spend time, and you learn so much. You've got me probably by about 440 episodes. I think maybe I've done about 61. 60 aired because I forgot to press record on one of them because I was too cheap to get the paid version of Zoom. So now I have the paid version, so it automatically gets recorded. So yeah.
Well, hey, that's to be celebrated, though, your 60 plus episodes, because there is a little statistic that says that only 1 in 10 podcasts that are launched make it to episode 50. So celebrate your success, Eric, for sure.
And actually, that's I wanted to bring up that you mentioned the word podcast. We're talking about how it's such a great platform. Are podcasts going to just keep getting better and better? Is the technology going to get better? What do you think is going to happen with podcasts?
Man. Eric, I believe that we are still in the embryonic stages of podcasting. That there's a lot of runway ahead of us. For example, one of the most common ways people listen to podcasts is in their car. They'll put a podcast episode on, they'll listen to it in their commute, like you do for your 9-minute commute. And that's a common way. And some vehicles today have smart radios where you can literally just talk to your radio and say, hey, pull up the latest episode of Deals for Dentists for me. and it just pops right up. But that's still not a common application in car manufacturers. But a lot of the experts in the podcasting space say that when that becomes standard equipment in all cars, then that's going to represent another big growth segment for people, because it just makes it that much more convenient. The experts in podcasting are calling that similar to when Apple came out with their podcast app. When iTunes came out with the podcast app, a little purple signal that's on everyone's phone. And of course, when iPhone came out with that, that meant that Android had to come out with their own version of that, and it's now been so much easier to listen to podcasts, and it's only going to get better, get easier, and we all need more information. I love your topic, Eric, because if you look at and one other comment that I should make, Eric, is that although I'm not a dentist, I do own a dental practice. I own it in partnership with two dentists, Dr. Paul and Dr. Tim, in Phoenix, Arizona. It's called Life Smiles Dental Care. I learned in 2007 that you didn't have to be a dentist in Arizona to own a practice. So I decided at that moment I wanted to be a owner so that I could test concepts out in my own practice and then share them with audiences when I was speaking with my clients and coaching. And it has so massively exceeded my expectations. I thought it would be useful, Eric, but it has radically exceeded my expectations. I learn things every day I'm in my office. I learn things. But when you look at, so I'm a practice owner. I pay attention to expenses, in the practice. And the world, what you're providing in terms of an awesome marketplace for dentists is incredible. And it really creates, I see it as game changing in many different ways. Because you, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but you partner with manufacturers and vendors and resources in all different aspects of dentistry, and provide it in a very convenient, all-inclusive marketplace for dentists, where you're able to provide very favorable pricing on their products and services. Did I get that close?
Yeah, so it's essentially it's a marketplace, and we wanted to create a place for dentists to go to see what new customer offers are out there. And I came up with the idea because I used to wait until the trade show price. I'd go to Yankee Dental and buy equipment. I used to do this a lot with dental implants, and I'd find out the new customer offer. And I wanted a place for dentists to go to see what deals are out there across the industry. So whether it's finding an accountant, software, consultants, marketing, equipment, you name it, it's on there. And dentists don't have time to be searching around for deals or calling around the local reps or waiting until the trade show. Especially young dentists. We want to be able to see what's out there now, and I want to be able to see what's out there across the country. Because as a dentist in Massachusetts, I knew local reps. I kind of knew the companies in the area, but I didn't know what was going on in the rest of the country.
Right.
And like I said, I would wait until the trade show. And Gary, if you know about these trade shows, I compare it to I was just at the car dealership the other day, and I walked in, and I've leased my car there many times. I've been through this song and dance many times. And I said, I'm a loyal customer. I've been here many times. Just give me the best deal you have. And the salesman came out and he said, I've got a great deal for you. And I looked it over. I said, okay, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. And he said, hang on 1 minute. Let me go back and check with my manager. And he went to the back room, and he came out and he said, I have an even better deal. And I'm like, you know what? Thinking in my head, just don't waste my time. Give me the best deal you have and let me make an educated decision. Yeah. So that was one of the reasons I came up with dealsfordentist.com.
Good for you, man. We've all had that experience on the car dealer side. It's like we've seen that movie. We know how it ends. But very, very cool. And it's transparent. What you're doing is transparent. your partners, I use that term loosely, but I don't know if you think of them as partners, but your manufacturers and service providers and vendors are really motivated to provide the best deal. And there it is, convenient for dentists, and they can see it. And really, it's so important on the business side of dentistry. I always say that on the business side, I always want to keep one eye on growth. I always want to have a growing practice, because practice is either growing or dying. I want to make sure we're growing. And I also have to keep an eye on expenses. And I want to make sure that we're being good, good stewards of our financial resources in the practice, so that it can be as profitable as possible. And what a great service. And love what you're doing, man. It's game changing for sure.
So Gary, you have a coaching program, the Thriving Dentist Academy, but I think what really makes you kind of unique is that you're also a practice owner. So you can firsthand see what's working and what's not working. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I wanted to own, when I learned that, I didn't know this. I learned it in 2007 that Arizona was one of 5 states where anyone can own a practice. And I said, I need to own a practice. And although I didn't need to partner with the dentist, I chose to do that. So I found a young dentist, Dr. Paul Nielsen, graduated in 2005 from the University of Washington School of Dentistry. And we bought a fixer-upper practice, and we've been on a journey to develop that into our ideal practice ever since. And we're not done. It's a work in progress. And today it's a very different practice than we bought. We have 2 doctors. We added Dr. Tim Schmidt in January of 2013, initially as an associate, and he became a partner in late 2015. And so the 3 of us own it. And it is a fertile test kitchen. We're testing concepts out, and I share with our clients and my audiences when I'm speaking what's working, what isn't working. I love to share where we stumble and fail, because maybe it can save some pain and suffering, for others. Maybe they can experience that vicariously instead of having to experience it on their own. But it really is a great experience. And I love what we're doing. I love dentistry. Pardon my enthusiasm around this, but I like to say dentistry rocks. And Eric, you and I didn't talk about this, but the reason I feel dentistry rocks is we have the opportunity to change people's lives every day. It could be clinically, something we do clinically that makes a radical difference for them, or it could be something behaviorally. Maybe you just have a patient today that needed someone to listen to them. And through your compassion and the empathy of you and your team members, they received some welcome ears of listening today that maybe was just what they needed. So I believe dentistry rocks. I started in this profession in 1980. My goodness, that was 41 years ago. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, man. Dentistry really does rock.
Yeah, you said some powerful things there, and I think it's so true, especially as of late, because of COVID. Our practice right now is like bursting from the seams, because people are coming out of the woodwork and they haven't been to the dentist in 15 months. Yeah. And they're so happy to like just be out and talking to someone. And
I think there's more to it than that. Then you're absolutely right on every one of those counts. Some people have been away from the dentist for 15, 16 months due to COVID. There's also been a fair amount of isolation, where they've been separated from a lot of the normal human contact that we would have. And I really believe part of a thriving practice is to have a relationship-driven practice, where we not only know our patients, but we know their names, we know their spouse's names, we know their kid's name, we know their dog's name, we know their hobbies, we know their interests, we know the important dates in their life, where they went to school. And the more I'm a nerd, and I love technology, and I love all things digital. And I imagine I'm preaching to the choir with you on that, Eric. Would that be a fair statement?
Mm-hmm.
But as the world goes more digital, there becomes an appetite for this human connection. And I think if we do dentistry right, your practice provides that connection that people are starved for right now. And I think it can really make a big difference in their lives. And man, I think dentistry, we're certainly experiencing the same thing you are, bursting at the seams. There's demand. I look at my client base. We have clients all over the country, and they are thriving right now, in part because of the increased demand for people that have been on the sidelines for the last, whether they be existing patients or new patients in the community, they've been on the sidelines for the last 15, 16 months. And there's a segment of the population, Eric, that understands the oral systemic connection, where we know the mouth and the teeth aren't isolated. They're part of our overall health system. And there's people that are learning that the healthier they are with their mouth, it improves their overall health as well. And so I think people are really interested in becoming as healthy as possible. And dentistry is one of the one of the aspects that can improve their overall health as well.
Yeah, you said something really, I think, important for dentists that, especially young dentists, they're coming out of school and we learn nothing about patient communication in school to connect with that patient. And what I learned to do is I will write down after I'm writing up my notes, I'll write some important things that the patient talked about. They're going on a trip, or a birthday party, or something they're into, or a job, so that the next time they come in, it's at the top of my notes and I'll ask them about it. And some patients will say, wow, you have such a great memory. And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay, but meanwhile, it's written down in the chart notes. But I think making that connection for especially for young dentists, you just get out of school, you don't really know how to talk to patients yet. Making that connection, finding out what's going on in that patient's life, they're going to remember that, and they're going to come back to you, and they're going to recommend their friends and family.
Can I share with you, Eric, where I learned that from? That the concept of writing down notes and serving as a memory prompt.
Yeah, where?
So I learned it from one of my mentors, Dr. Omar Reed. You'll probably recognize that name. Dr. Reed took me under his wing when I started in this profession in 1980. And sadly, we lost Dr. Reed in January of last year. But he will forever be a mentor of mine, posthumously as well, because of how much I've learned from him. But you have to go back to 1980. And remember the technology that we had and maybe didn't have back then. He had, in addition to having charts for his patients, he had a Rolodex file. Remember those, Eric?
Sure. Yeah.
Circular files. And he had it was like an oversized 5x7 card for each one of his patients. It was alphabetized. And after he would see a patient, he'd duck into his office and he'd write notes about the patient. Maybe their dog's name, maybe their hobbies, their interests. And over the years, and he invited his team members to contribute to those notes, because very often team members would learn things even more than the doctor sometimes, and they'd write those notes down. And then over the years, this became a treasure trove of information about patients. But he not only did that, but he did the next best thing. He applied it. He would come in, he worked from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. That was his hours, 6 a.m. to 2. Mm-hmm. Started early and finished early. And so he did his morning huddle at 5:45. And he came in 30 minutes before the morning huddle. I would meet him at the office. He volunteered to mentor me, so I always wanted to show appreciation for him. So my goal was to be at his back door in his office before he arrived. And so he'd arrive at 5:15 like clockwork. So I had to make sure I was standing on that back door waiting for him when he arrived at 5:15. First thing he would do after turning on the compressor and turning on the water, he would go look at his daily schedule, and he'd pull the Rolodex card up on every one of the patients he was seeing today. And he'd study, and he would just do his homework. Because, it's interesting, Gary. I heard dentists say, well, Gary, I just don't have a very good memory. Well, first of all, I disagree with that, because you wouldn't be a dentist if you didn't have a good memory. At a very basic level, think about what you had to memorize in organic chem. You've got a good memory. Quit giving yourself negative self-talk.
You able to learn the Krebs cycle? You can learn. You can memorize something about a patient. Yeah,
exactly. So what he did though, and so here's my comment about memory. Let's say you have a large practice with 2,000 or 3,000 patients, active patients. You don't have to know everything about 2,000 or 3,000 patients. You just have to know the patients you're seeing today. Mm-hmm. And those notes can do that. So we do the same thing today, but we do it not with a Rolodex file, but we do it with we have a place in our software where we store notes like that. By the way, not in clinical notes, because it'll get lost there, but we have a place. And now what I recommend our clients to do, and I'm not going to win a popularity contest on this recommendation. So, sometimes we got to do the hard things. Doctor, show up 20 minutes before your morning huddle. Okay, I think I lost half of your listening audience right there. But show up 20 minutes before your morning huddle, look at your schedule, and pull up that note card on every one of those patients, especially hygiene, because it's likely you haven't seen them. I mean, on the restorative side, you maybe saw them more recently relative to diagnosis. But on the hygiene side, it's going to be 6 months. Heck, because of COVID, it could be 16 months ago. And now you do your homework. And if it was me, Eric, you're going to walk in and say, Gary, it's so good to see you. How's your wife, Therese? Now, she started that yoga studio recently. How's your yoga studio going? How's your grandson, Kanan? And you're going to have me at hello right there. And I think
it's so true.
It says so many things. You think about what that does. And I don't think you can fake this. Let me make that comment. You have to be, if you're not interested in your patients, then just forget this. Just fast forward. Just forget it. But I believe your listeners and my listeners and many, many, many dentists are genuinely interested in their patients. And now you're simply using a prompt to express that to patients. And I think it says so many things. It says you remembered. That's a good thing. It says you care. That's a good thing. And you know what I think it says most importantly is that I'm important to you. I'm important to you. And you remember. And, it's not rocket science. But if you go back and read that classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that book written by Dale Carnegie in 1937, this is the kind of thing that Dale Carnegie talked about, over 90 years ago when he wrote that book. And it's timeless and it's missing in the world today.
Yeah, I think the things you just said are such practice builders and such gems, and it's really not that hard to do. Just treat people well, and be genuine. But if it's not for you and you're not interested, don't do it. Don't be
Exactly.
Don't be disingenuous.
I teach on Mondays, Eric, at Midwestern University School of Dental Medicine here in Glendale. So I teach on Mondays. I teach the business and behavioral side of dentistry, the people side of dentistry. I teach my dental students this, and I tell them, like, I love this backstory that I tell that, Eric, I wish you could have known my grandmother. I wish all of your listeners could have known my grandmother. Hazel was one of the most amazing people ever on this planet. And she loved people. And if you met my grandmother, I guarantee you within 2 minutes, she would have reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet, and out would have cascaded a whole bunch of family photos. And she would have shared those family photos with you. Did you get an idea of who my grandmother was?
I do. Yeah, sure.
And grandmas still do the same thing today. They just don't do it in a purse and physical photos cascading out of their wallet. They pull out an iPhone 12 and start showing you pictures of their dog, pictures of their latest pie that they baked. So I tell my dental students, I start with them in D1. I said, now, when you get into clinic in D3 and D4, I'm going to be wandering around the clinic, and I'm going to be listening and coaching you on how to communicate with your patients, how to connect with them, how to develop rapport and relationship with them. And I know that if you are talking to your patient and your patient has their phone up showing you something, that you're in with that patient. You are connecting with them. So I want to see those. I want to see your patient's phone up. I want them showing you something about their lives, because when they're letting you into their lives with that. And so we can apply that in practice. Absolutely apply that in practice as well.
I think that is so cool that you're doing that with the dental students. I didn't have that in dental school. In fact, the patient was like, they weren't even there. We talked over the patient. We talked about the patient. We didn't learn how to, create that patient experience.
Yeah, our dean, Dr. Brad Smith, I'll brag on him for just a minute. He's a very unique dean. He practiced dentistry as a general dentist for 25 years, very successfully, and he chose academics as the last chapter in his career. So, man, he gets it. And he recruited me. He was a tireless recruiter. He recruited me for about 3 years, and I'm so happy that he was relentless, because I'm there on Mondays and I love it. I really enjoy teaching these kids, and they're, I like to say that our future in our profession is in very good hands when I look at the just the interest and skill and passion among young dentists. It's exciting.
So I want to actually wrap things up with two final questions. One is about the Less Insurance Dependency podcast and what that's all about.
Yeah. Well, one thing we didn't realize when Paul and I bought that practice was that it was infected with PPO plans. We discovered that after about 10 minutes. Actually, it didn't take that long. I think I discovered that in about 2 minutes of our ownership. I went to the office manager and I said, Rhonda, how many plans? It seems like we're on a lot of plans. How many plans are we on? And she said, Gary, I'm not entirely sure because the previous dentist signed up for every plan he could find. So I'm not sure, but don't quote me on this, but I think maybe 12. And I said, okay, I'll look into it and I'll let you know what I find out. And I dug into it and I quickly discovered that we were contracted with 34 PPO plans.
Wow.
Now, I want to be clear, Rhonda nor the previous dentist was ignorant. They weren't ignorant. The dentist, simply didn't realize that when he signed up for MetLife, he thought he was signing up for one plan. Well, I think buried on page 289 of the PPO contract, he discovered, if he read that, which he didn't, he would have discovered that MetLife was part of an umbrella plan that included 5 other PPOs. So when he was signing up for one, he was actually signing up for 6. And that's how 12 became 34. And we couldn't get him to work with the style of practice we wanted to have. Paul and I had a simple vision. We wanted to take care of patients the way we'd like to be taken care of, clinically and behaviorally. Clinically, that meant we provide the diagnosis we want, we provide the technology we want, we provide the quality of dental care that we would want. And behaviorally, it meant we would provide the kind of experience that we would want as a patient. And we couldn't do that. Our average discount was about 42%, meaning that we handed off 42% of our fees right off the top to the insurance company. And we couldn't make our practice vision work. So after about 4 months, we started resigning. And successfully, we're able to resign from PPO plans. So I wanted to start that resource, the Less Insurance Dependence podcast, to help dentists that are interested in reducing insurance dependence in their practice. By the way, you do not have to be fee for service to be successful with that. That's why we call it reducing insurance dependence, because success might mean starting out with 10 or 12 plans and getting down to 1 or 2. And maybe you have so much success with that. And one of the ways we measure success is what % of our in-network patients do we keep when we go out of network. Maybe you have so much success with that it emboldens you to take the final leap. But you don't have to be entirely fee-for-service to make that successful. But my goal is to help dentists reduce the impact of third-party intrusion on your fees. Can I just do something playful for just a minute with you, Eric?
Sure, of course.
I don't know your team members, but I'll bet you got a pretty good guard at the gate administratively in your practice that keeps salesmen away from your private office. Is that salespeople away from your private? Is that fairly accurate to say?
Oh yeah, they're well trained. They know if it's a salesperson coming in, I'm not in.
Yeah, but what if, let's just assume for a minute that somehow a salesperson snuck by the guard at the gate and they're in your office, and you walk in just to catch your breath, and there's a salesperson. Dr. Block, have I got a deal for you today? Here's the deal. Look, I'm going to supply you with patients, and all you have to do is pay me 44% of every bit of dentistry you do on these patients for the rest of their life. Sign here. Can we agree that'll be about the shortest conversation that you would ever have with a salesperson? Because nobody would do that.
I mean, the way you put it like that, it just sounds so crazy. And it's, I think it becomes like almost like a drug. Like practices want to get new patients and they see insurance as a way of getting a volume of patients.
Yeah. Well, I want, from this moment forward, I want all of your listeners to think of your adjustments. And that's the difference between your usual fee and your contracted fee, which, by the way, today averages 42 to 44%. So if it's 44% and your procedure fee is $1,000, I'll just make up a round number so it makes the math easy. You're not getting $1,000 on that service if it's a PPO patient. You're getting $560, the 56%, the opposite of the 44. And I want you to look at that difference as a marketing expense, because you are paying Delta, I'll just call them out, there's others, you're paying the PPO to provide you patients. And today, the truth is you could spend a lot less than that and get the added benefit of patients choosing you for reasons other than you're on their insurance. Now, we're always very patient friendly when we do this. Let me explain what I mean by that. They can still come to your office. They can use whatever benefits they have in your office. We still file their claims like we always have. We still submit all the documentation. We still follow up with the insurance companies because they don't always do what they're supposed to do. And we help our patients get every nickel of benefit. And when patients realize that they can still come to you and whatever benefits they have, they use there, many, many patients will choose to stay in your practice. But there's a grassroots movement happening now among dentists wanting to regain control and reduce or eliminate that third-party fee intrusion. If you owned a restaurant, Eric, would you let someone else set your menu prices in your restaurant when they had no idea the quality of your ingredients, the quality of your service, your investment in technology? Why would you let a third party that has no interest in your profitability set your fees?
Okay,
I'll get off my soapbox.
And it creates so many barriers, and that third-party intrusion, reduced fees is just and so much time and energy wasted from you and the staff. Gary, before we wrap things up, one final question for any of those young dentists or young entrepreneurs out there. Give them some advice out there, some nuggets.
Yeah, thank you for that question, by the way. And I have a very quick response to you because I've given this lots of thought. By the way, I think every career path in dentistry is a good career path. I don't think there's any bad career paths in dentistry, whether it be, as an associate doctor, in research, choosing to be a specialist, perhaps, maybe military, maybe working in community health. I think they're all good career paths. But of all the career paths, I happen to believe with every ounce of my DNA that the best career path is to own your own practice. And so my advice to a young dentist is to put yourself in a position as quickly as possible to become a practice owner. Now, there's some practical steps that you should take, but put yourself in a position to become a practice owner as soon as possible. The only regret that I have in being a practice owner is that I didn't do it before 2007. I wish I would have known that before, because if I would have known that before, I would have become a practice owner. So for all the young dentists out there, work to put yourself in a position to be a practice owner, because in my opinion, it is the very best career path of all in terms of our profession.
Gary, that is such great advice. And that's one of the biggest regrets that I had in my career, is that I didn't become a practice owner sooner. I associated for way too long. So I tell all the young dentists out there the same thing, get a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years under your belt, learn under someone else's dime, and then pull the trigger, become a practice owner, and you'll never look back. So Gary,
if a young dentist is serious about becoming a practice owner, if they're willing to put the work in 2-3 years max, they could, upon graduation, could absolutely be a practice owner. And I'd work on that time period. I'd work on 3 things. Number one, I'd work on your hand speed. Let's recognize that dental school, is not about, training you to be efficient with speed. And you don't have to be a speed demon, but you have to be efficient at providing quality care. So work on your speed. Secondly, work on your range. Depending on what your experience was in dental school, you might need more at-bats with, simple oral surgery, with endo, with procedures maybe you didn't have a lot of experience with. So work on your range of services. And then number 3, learn as much as you can about the business side of dentistry, because it's likely that dental school didn't prepare you for that. And I have a bias here, Eric, but my bias is one of the best ways to do that is through podcast listening. And man, we'd love your listeners to pop over to Thriving Dentist Show and listen, and the Less Insurance Dependence podcast, and listen. They're all free. We've got 503 episodes on the Thriving Dentist Show and 153 on Less Insurance Dependence podcast. I think free is a good deal for it. I mean, can we tie it into the title of your podcast? I think free is a good deal. What do you think?
That's my favorite word is free. So I think that's a great segue there. So Gary, awesome stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the Deals for Dentists podcast on your favorite podcast platform and our weekly newsletter so you don't miss any of our upcoming shows. Gary, let's be in touch. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. This was a blast. Thanks, Eric.
All right. Take care.